Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, April 8th, 8:46 a.m. We are back for another market open. We are alive. We are here on planet Earth. It's time to start a brand new week. We've got a lot to talk about on today's show. Tesla, obviously, Friday was insane for Tesla. Some of you guys might have joined the market close where we were covering in real time Elon Musk tweet that Robotaxis were coming out on August 8th. So we're going to be discussing that. We're going to be discussing the Reuters article that was fake, but also kind of true in the context of like what Tesla's probably prioritizing. FSD, over 1 billion miles that have been driven. That was revealed by Tesla on Friday. There's so much stuff to talk about there. So we'll get into that. CPI is coming this week. Very, very important CPI. I was appalled by the banks and their expectations, which I probably shouldn't be because inflation has reaccelerated a little bit, but they think it's coming in at 3.4. So if we don't come in below 3.4, dare we come in at 3.5, 3.6, which is kind of closer to 4, which we haven't seen 4% in about 4 or 5 months, it's going to get pretty ugly. So we're going to talk about CPI. We're going to get Tom Lee's thoughts on CPI, what he thinks is happening there. Earnings start again. It just feels like we recovered from earnings seasons. We're starting again for Q1 2024. This Friday, the big banks are giving out their earnings, and we're going to discuss what's going on with those big banks. On top of that, Jamie Dimon just released a shareholder letter, so we also have to talk about his expectations for 2024. He is cautiously bullish. He has some things in there that I think were interesting to talk about. So we got a lot to get into. We'll talk about all that, and we'll keep going from there. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. John Stevens, Top Dasher, Freddie, Sethi Roth, David, Ty Gordon, Sean, John, Yeti, Foolish Hiker, Jason, Bond, Jimbo Slice, Cows, Harry Wild, Golden Eagle, Ray, Mitchell, Merv, Theo, Bontron, June, Felicia, Marvin, Mitch, Dominic, Mr. Russo. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Jerry, Katie, Mervin, William, thank you all again. Let's get into the market open on another Monday morning. We're here back again Monday to start off the week. First of all, I hope everyone had a good weekend. So let me know in the chat what you did over the weekend. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope you got to spend some time with family and just relax. I had some things happen over the weekend. So before we get started in the market open, we've got to do the things that I said I was going to do, the promise I made you as a community. Also, Bitcoin. How could I forget to mention Bitcoin's at 70K? I forgot to mention that in the beginning. Yeah, we got to talk about Bitcoin. I promised you guys last Friday that I was going to do something that you all wanted me to do, and I did it. Okay, so it's time for me to give my 2-minute unofficial official review of Back to the Future. I watched it. I actually watched it. I'm surprised I watched it. I really didn't think I was going to do it. But at one point yesterday, Sunday, I was like, you know what? Let me just pull it up on the computer. I found some illegal website. I really don't know why people pay for movies, dude. Everything's on the internet. Like if you pay for a movie, like you literally just have to do 3 extra Google searches and you'll find the movie. So I'm sorry, the movies are there. But Back to the Future, I watched it for the first time. So I'll give you my thoughts in a second. Vlad commented under the post. So the backstory behind why I actually wanted to watch Back to the Future is because in the Vlad interview, if you saw at the end, I was like, hey, what's your favorite movie? And he's like, oh, Back to the Future. And I'm like, oh, great. That's a great movie. Yup, awesome. And everyone knew, if you're part of the channel, there's no way in hell Amit knows if that's a good movie or not. He's just saying that right now because he just wants to move on and, not cause any controversy, as if he were to tell the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company that he didn't watch his favorite movie. But I decided, you know what? I probably have to watch this movie. And then Vlad commented, you should also check out the Broadway musical. And I said, I'll do that. And I'll also make sure I only drive 87 miles per hour while I'm on the way to the Broadway show. Ladies and gentlemen, I thought this was one of the best movies of all time. It was a good movie. It was actually a good movie. It was a phenomenal movie. I didn't think I would go into it liking it because I'm more of a Christopher Nolan fan. Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar. I need like a much more dramatic kind of plot. This was more like, it was obviously very dramatic, but it was also more like just kind of feel good, wholesome type of vibe, kind of Ferris Bueller's Day Off type of vibe, obviously that 80s vibe, but also a deep plot with a big twist at the end. I did not know that was going to happen at the end with the doc. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody because everybody already probably knows because they watched it, but it was a really good movie. And what's really important to me now is I understand all the references. 88 miles per hour. I'm definitely going to be using that in random references now. 1.21 gigawatts. I mean, this stuff is vital stuff from a cultural perspective that I needed to know. And now I know it. So I thought it was really good. Also, I got so excited for it. I watched the second one last night. So the second one was also really good. I enjoyed it. I haven't watched the third one yet. People are telling me the third one isn't as good as the first two. People said the second was the best. I thought the second was great. The first one was really good in my opinion. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a great film, great series. And it's the first time I ever watched it. Everyone in the chat saying it's a classic. Yeah, it's a classic, and I just never took the time to watch it. But I watched it. Flux capacitor, all that stuff. It was good. Now I get the references, so I actually feel happy that I actually understand some of the stuff that's going on. Okay, cool. So that was good. Back to the Future review. Let's get into Tesla. So for those that missed what happened over the past 3 days, Tesla on Friday fell about 7%. And the reason it fell 7% was because Reuters published a report, and that report was based on the fact that they believe Tesla is not going to be able to, or not planning to create the Model 2. Now, what is the Model 2? The Model 2 is the car that's supposed to compete with the Toyotas, Camrys, and the Honda Civics of the world. Why is that important? Well, if you were to create a $25,000 car, I paid $23,000 for my Honda Civic back in 2019. I would have bought a Tesla if, a Tesla was available for $25,000 because a Tesla is really cool. And if I was going to spend $25,000, I might as well spend it on something that actually is important, right? Something that matters a little bit more than a Honda Civic. Reuters said, hey, they're not creating that anymore. They're scrapping those plans. And the article hinted that they were going all in on the Robotaxi. Reuters said they had some pretty good sources to indicate that they were going all in on Robotaxis. And as a result of that, we saw Tesla take a big fall. The reason is because the market doesn't really give a shit about Robotaxis. They care. Right now, as you can see, Tesla up 2.03%. The market cares about deliveries, volumes, and margins. And that Model 2 at $25,000 a vehicle was going to create substantial deliveries and volumes one could at least hypothesize for Tesla. So Elon comes out, the stock's at 161 when this happens. It's about to fall to 159. I think it bottomed at 160.52. Elon says Reuters is lying. Elon says, nope, Reuters is lying. They're wrong. Don't believe them. And so the stock recovers and it gets up to 165, 166. And people are like, okay, so Reuters is just fake news. No one really, Reuters is Reuters. They're wrong. Then a couple hours later, Elon tweets, Robotaxi unveil 8/8. And what was really interesting about that is basically Elon was saying, hey, not only is Reuters lying, but we're going all in on, or not we're going all in, but the kind of assumption here was kind of, hey, we're starting to really focus on Robotaxi. So Tesla Robotaxi reveal on 8/8. The question here that I think is on everyone's mind is, was Reuters actually lying? Was Reuters actually lying? And the reason I say this is because it kind of felt like Elon put out this tweet as a response to the Reuters article. I mean, there was no one knew that a Robotaxi event was coming out of nowhere. Who even knows if a Robotaxi event was planned or if this was in response to the article? But what I've heard on Twitter from some Tesla experts that I trust more than myself in regards to analysis on Tesla is that the Robotaxi and the Model 2 was always the same vehicle. That's one hypothesis that was put out there. I didn't really know that was a hypothesis, but that's their argument. So when Reuters is saying, hey, they're scrapping the Model 2 to go all in on Robotaxi, the kind of the byproduct of assumptions there are that FSD is becoming so good that Tesla thinks, hey, Robotaxi, which obviously the margins on that are incredibly more than even what the margins would be like on a $25,000 car, is more profitable to go after, which has always been the bull case for Tesla, right? FSD, Robotaxi, that's Cathie Wood's $2,000 valuation model. That might be one assumption. The other assumption is they're not really scrapping Model 2 production, but if Model 2 was always going to be the Robotaxi, which is this kind of compact vehicle, then yeah, Elon's right. Reuters is lying, but they're maybe not lying because maybe Model 2 is not going to the mass public like a Honda Civic competitor, but maybe it's becoming a Robotaxi, which is what the intention always was, or at least what the intention has become. As you can see right here, Tesla has hit 1 billion miles driven on FSD. The question I have for the chat is, how long do you think this takes to double to 2 billion? They launched it in 2020. Took 4 years to get to 1 billion. You see this big uptick right here. That's when they enabled free trials for every single Tesla. And that's when it really crossed the 1 billion FSD miles driven level. I think in the next 3 to 4 months, this thing can get to 2 billion, if not shorter than that, because now you got 4 or 5 million vehicles on the road that have FSD, something like that, or at least a free trial version of it. If they unleash that, even if they give you another month of free trial, another 3 months of free trial, just to get you hooked into it, they're going to pass that pretty aggressively. And the network effect for Tesla is exceptional, because if they pass those FSD miles driven to the 5, 10, $15 billion levels, they're going to get so much more data. Their neural nets are going to get so much stronger. No other company in the automotive market, in the AI market, in the robotics market has anything like the billions of miles FSD is being driven on for Tesla to be able to compartmentalize that data, ultimately train their models, and become smarter from there. So if that's the case, and a robotaxi is actually happening because FSD is becoming prime time and it's being unveiled on August 8th, the question is it actually going to be unveiled, or is it going to be Cybertruck in 2019 that takes 5 years to get to market? Or is FSD so good that the platform is going to be unveiled and maybe it takes 1 or 2 years to ramp up production of the robotaxi, which is quote unquote the M2 vehicle that Reuters said was being scrapped, and then Tesla's going to start scaling into the market? Everyone's kind of confused. No one really knows, but it seems like these are all valuable kind of assumptions you can make on the state of what's going to happen in the context of Tesla. Nemo says, as weird as it may sound, I tend to believe what comes out of Reuters more than an Elon tweet. I can understand that perspective. I also think it's very weird. Reuters says Elon's going all in on Robotaxi. Elon says they're lying, and then 5 minutes later, he says, by the way, we're having a Robotaxi event. It kind of seemed like it was reactionary to the article. Now, Reuters probably is wrong on like the overall framing of it, because their argument is like he's just scrapping the M2. It's just not happening anymore. Maybe Elon never really considered it the way, the market thought of it. But it did seem a little weird that it was, that quick of a reaction as a response to that argument. Regardless, the stock is up right now 2.12%. Unfortunately, they got another downgrade, or maybe fortunately, because at this point the downgrades are becoming a little bullish for Tesla. I said this a couple of weeks ago that it feels like peak fear, and peak fear is when Wall Street tends to want your shares because they know that no other company is doing 1 billion miles of FSD driven. Like, Wall Street understands what moats are, and it seems like they know Tesla has a moat, but they want it at cheaper prices. So fortunately or unfortunately, Bernstein comes out with a downgrade today. They say, we see Robotaxi unveiling on August 8th as more aspirational, akin to Tesla's Semi and Roadster announcements. So they basically saying, hey, this announcement is full of shit. That's basically what they're saying right now. And not likely to be Tesla's next model. We only expect competitors' offerings to get better over the next 3 years. BYD currently offers a 15K sedan that has a 250-mile range and is bigger than the Model 3. $120 price target. The more of these downgrades we see, the more I guess you can interpret it as bullish, because peak fear is starting to happen. Again, I've been on record saying I think Tesla, given what we've seen over the past couple of weeks in terms of news, this thing should be at like 150, 145. The fact that it's held up after having the worst deliveries in 2 years, the fact that it's held up after potentially their Model 2 being scrapped, like the fact that it's holding close to this 168, 175 range is just incredible. It means that someone's buying the dip. I don't think it's just retail. Obviously, we know Kathy is buying the dip. She bought another 100,000 shares on Friday. But like, people are buying, and it might just be the Wall Street firms, the Wells Fargos of the world, the UBS of the world that say, hey, this thing is worth 120. They might be buying at 160. We'll see when their 13Gs come out in probably, I think, 2 weeks now, we'll get those reports. Who's actually buying? But the stock's holding up. The stock's holding up pretty well. And that's what we got right now in the world of Tesla. And so that's what we're seeing right now. Musk picked 88. That might have something to do with China. Maybe it might have something to do with China as well. But it's been pretty exciting to see Tesla still hold up at these levels, even though the market obviously has said, hey, we don't believe Tesla should be worth this level. But people are buying. Here's Gene Munster on his thoughts on what's going to happen with robotaxis over the next couple of years.
Managing partner, Gene Munster. Gene, we're going to bring you on to talk about kind of something different. Maybe we'll get to it, but I got to ask you, robotaxis, everyone's been waiting. Is this a big deal?
Brian, it is a big deal, and I think that it's an important context to the investor. Phil framed it in well in terms of what the potential impact is, just higher margin. Before I do that, I want to just mention this is probably coming at the cost of them not pursuing the cheaper Model 2 $25,000 vehicle that was on the table. They've talked about that. That probably is now on pause and all.
So Gene thinks that Reuters basically was correct, essentially. That's kind of his argument here. He thinks there has to be some trade-off.
The focus is on Robotaxi. I suspect the reason why they've made that change here recently is they have more confidence in some of that beta that you were just talking about. The the response so far, including our own Andrew Murphy from Deepwater, who's been following this, uses this technology, has been that this is a step function improvement. So we're getting much closer. But I want to put some quick numbers on, Brian, why this is such a big deal, why this is a win for Tesla investors. And it will take a long time to get there, 3, 4, 5 years. But to put in perspective, if they do 1 million robotaxis, that's a number that Elon talked about in 2019, 1 million robotaxis, and those robotaxis earn $250 a day each, and they take a 15% take rate on that, that adds $10 billion to the operating line, the net income line. That is basically double what their current net income is. Again, it'll take a long time to get there, but if you just think about the levers and about shifting this company in a whole different direction back to the growth topic, this has the potential to do that.
All right, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens with Tesla. That's the update on Tesla. If you're just joining, Robotaxis, Elon Musk has unveiled on August 8th. Some people were saying, oh, he didn't put the year because he only put 8/8. I was like, dude, this is not happening in 2028. This is happening in 2024. If there's not a Robotaxi event in 2024, even if it's just an announcement of what it could look like, that would be very weird for him to announce 8 years in advance. Could you imagine on August 7th, he's like, oh, by the way, I meant 2025, not 2024. There's no way. We're getting that event 2024. We're probably not getting a Robotaxi in 2024. Probably not getting it in 2025. FSD needs to become perfect, like absolutely pristine for Robotaxis to happen. I think 2026, the earliest, is when we see a Robotaxi actually unveiled. Now, granted, I think 2025, we can have hints of it. So in San Francisco, in Austin, in different parts of the world, in Vegas, where they've been more receptive to things like Cruise and Waymo, et cetera, I think that's where we will see pilots of it. And if those pilots are good and people are excited and they like it, and Tesla really does a good job there because they got at least the pilot vehicles out into the market, that's going to generate excitement for the broader rollout. But the rollout will probably take a year or two in order for that to happen. Now, if the market prices that in, which Adam Jonas was talking about over the weekend, he put out a new report saying that he only put $62 of his $310, so about, what does it call it, 1/5 roundabout of his price target on around 1/5 of his price target is based on the automotive business. The rest of the $250 has to do with technology-enabled portions of the business, one of those being robotaxis. Same thing with Kathy Wood. So those do have to be rolled out for us to get super excited about it and for it to make sense in the stock. And so we'll see over the next coming months how the market actually interprets that. Bitcoin right now, 72,000, Ethereum 3,600. Let's get an update on the markets. We've got ARM up 1.1%. We've got Tesla up 2.3%. Google 154.33. Meta 529, trying to crush those all-time highs on Meta. Robinhood $18.90, up 2.72%. S&P 500 519. SoFi 750. Rivian 1017. MicroStrategy up 10% in the pre-market as well. Uber's down just a little bit. SMCI up 1.79%. Now, all of the green we're seeing right now in the pre-market can go away, and it can go away pretty quickly if something happens this week that is bad for the green. Palantir as well, 23.16 in the pre-market. And what could be bad for the green is CPI. Here is Tom Lee's expectations on CPI, what he thinks is going to happen, and what he also thinks about JP Morgan's warning to the market about inflationary concerns possibly coming back.
I think Jamie's doing his shareholders justice because they want to hear from him about all the concerns out there. I think he does a great job of detailing all the things that could go wrong. But at the end of the day, when it comes to markets, I think markets tend to price concerns very quickly. I mean, I think that's really been the concern for the last 2 years is a hard landing. And now that inflationary pressures are easing at a time when consumers don't have a lot of leverage, there's all this, there's $6 trillion of cash on the sidelines. And inflation, we don't really know how quickly it's going to fall, but our bet at Fundstrat is that it's going to fall pretty quickly, means some of the concerns he listed about a hard landing are because of sticky inflation. And if it's softer, I think we're going to have quite a good economy.
Is this a two-pronged outlook on the economy and the markets, though, Tom? Is inflation the one big issue? And if Wednesday proves that it's a hotter than anticipated or hotter than expected CPI number, would you change your ideas about what that means for both of those things for the long term or for the year?
That's right. I think if inflation, because March is going to be the first clean CPI report. We know out of Europe, they've come in pretty soft. They've come in better than expected. If it comes in higher than expected, then I think it raises the question that the inflation is quite stubborn, and getting to that from 3 to 2 is going to be difficult. On the other hand, if it is a soft report and we think it's the probabilities favor below a 0.3, that's consensus core of 0.3, I think it's going to change a lot of people's minds that inflation may not be that stubborn.
Yeah. You have been telling people to buy, or you yourself have been buying on any dips. And by dips, we're not talking 5 or 10% drops. You're talking 2% drops, and you'd be buying into the market?
That's right. I think that there's many reasons that we still think there's gas in the tank in this rally. Part of it is that we do think the inflation trajectory is on a glide path lower than consensus expects. The second is I think there's too much caution out there. You know, when you look at prime brokerage borrowings or basically leverage in the market, it's still below where it was in October 2021. There's still $6 trillion of cash on the sidelines. In our conversations with clients, they're still quite cautious. So as long as investors are top calling and are really looking at the world half empty, I think stocks can still rise on this wall of worry.
So what's interesting here about what Tom Lee's saying is that he thinks CPI is actually going to come in better than what the market's expecting. The market's not expecting the best CPI though. So U.S. March inflation data is on Wednesday. I'll be live at 8:20 a.m., 8:30. We'll get those numbers. I would really be cautious of having any short-term options for this week when it comes to CPI. Like, for example, let's say you have some, I don't know, $22 cash accrued puts on Palantir or something like that. Obviously, it's not the end of the world if you get assigned those things. You can always roll those positions. But if CPI is hot, which every bank is expecting, as you can see right here, 3.4% versus 3.2% in February. And if that comes in at 3.5, 3.6, that's not going to be pretty for the market. I mean, like, the market's green right now. Things are okay. I don't think it's going to be a thesis breaking thing for the market. I think it's going to be something that we just have to swallow up and we'll deal with later. And eventually inflation will come down. But this report might end up being a little hotter than what we think. Now, Tom Lee thinks that there's a couple of things that are going to cool it down, aka shelter and energy. The problem is, I don't know if the Fed's data is going to be strong enough to be able to factor in shelter definitively decreasing CPI, at least going into this month, and maybe in the coming months that'll happen. And then energy, unfortunately, where's oil right now? Oil prices, well, they're down today a little bit. They're down about 1%, but Brent crude still at $90, WTI crude at $86. Oil's got to come down. And if oil doesn't come down, April CPI is not going to be good. If April CPI is not going to be good, then we're definitely not getting a cut in May or June. If we're not getting a cut in May or June, then unless May or June really come down on the inflation front, July's off the table as well, which means we're looking at September right before the election. Ironically, that's how it always works out, right? So I don't know, dude. It's the CPI is a little annoying on this. If Tom Lee's right and the CPI actually comes in better than expected, I think we take off like a freaking rocket ship, because at that point, you can't imagine there's that much data left lagging in the system that's going to drain the inflation readings for the next couple months. Like, yeah, energy is going to be a little bit of a drain, but eventually energy is a Middle East thing. That conflict will eventually resolve, hopefully a little bit. And we'll have energy come down, but shelter is the big thing. And unless shelter comes down, it's not going to be the best for CPI. So I would be cautious on the options this week. If you have something expiring short term, if you have your long-term positions, I think it'll create a really good dip to buy, because I do think inflation will come down for the broader year. But in the meantime, it might be a choppy week based on CPI. Now, Tom Lee was correct on money markets. So we saw this last Friday. Money markets have increased to $6.1 trillion. The $70 billion that left over the past 3 weeks, they came right back. And now money markets have $6.1 trillion. So it's the highest we've had in money markets for a very long time. I would imagine that stuff probably goes down, over the coming weeks. Eventually, that money will want to chase yield, and yield comes from when the Fed cuts rates. But until the Fed cuts rates, maybe that money stays stuck in money markets and doesn't leave, right? So yes, he's right that there is a ton of money on the sidelines. Not that he's not factoring it in, but what I think everyone has to remember is that money is there because they're getting 5.5 risk-free. Q1 already performed great. So until we get less than 5.5 risk-free, which means rates have to come down, maybe the incentive to chase yield from the stock market is not as high, given a lot of people, the reason I'm not buying Facebook at 527, even though I think Facebook's going to crush on their earnings, is because it's 5x up, right? Like I kind of missed the run. Sometimes you miss it and it is what it is. And so it's hard to buy these things when they're that high, even though the trend theoretically is your friend and you should be buying assets as they continue to go higher. But it is, I think it's going to be hard for a lot of people to justify buying a market that's up 10%, given they're getting 5% for doing nothing. Once that yield comes down, I think it's a lot easier to buy those, buy shares in the market. And we'll see how that plays out. Kathy Wood, let's talk about Kathy. What did Kathy buy? So on Friday, Kathy did some big buying and selling. She bought 109,000 shares of Tesla. So she spent basically 17.5 million on Tesla, assuming an average price of around 162. Which if she bought it on that dip to 160, 162, that was a hell of a buy from her. That was a really good buy if she bought on the Reuters article that tanked it. And by the way, we talked about Kathy not like being the best timer. She times Tesla very well. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but in July 2023, she was selling the crap out of Tesla at 270, 260, 280. Like, people tend to forget this is the one stock she's gotten very right over the past 7 years. She buys and sells kind of at the right times. Now, if Tesla tanks down to like 130, 140, these are going to be pretty horrendous buys. But if that doesn't happen, she did make a ton of profits selling it at 260, 270. And it seems like she thinks it's cheap right now, buying it in this 160 range. She sold about 1 million shares of Robinhood, 923,000 shares of Robinhood, and 62,000 shares of Coinbase. Look, she has a lot of shares of Robinhood. She has like 15 million shares after this sell. So to me, I think she's just trading profits on Coinbase and Robinhood, which you probably should do. Robinhood long-term compared to Tesla. I think we all understand the potential of Tesla. They're much more bullish on Tesla. So you want to trade profits from the companies that have done well. She was buying millions of shares of Robinhood at $9-10, and she's up on that. And so exchanging those profits for Tesla, I don't think is the biggest deal in the world. Also, speaking of Kathy, she ended up making me happy yesterday by doing something. She followed. So we got a big one. Last night. This is actually kind of cool. This is something I didn't really expect, but it's so ironic. I got a follow from a Kathy Wood account the other day, like I think on Saturday. And I checked it and I pressed it. And obviously it was like an account that had like 40 followers or some random fake account. And I was like, all right, whatever. And then yesterday I got Kathy D. Wood followed you back. And when I looked at it for a second, I was like, followed you back. What does that mean? That means I'm already following that person. So then I clicked on it and then boom, there you go. We got the official Kathy Wood. She only follows 399 people. So happy to be one of those people. I think she found me from the Robinhood interview. So here's me on Friday on the market close, kind of predicting what might end up happening. Here's 30 seconds. Question a bit. Any future interviews coming up? So this is a good question. None of them that I've planned yet, but I do think that the Vlad interview gets me a little bit more credibility to ask some of these people for interviews. And so, honestly, I'll just say it right now. The next person I want to get is Kathy. I think it's possible to get her. The reason I'm saying this, and I'm saying this literally off the top of my head, I have not asked or anything like that, is because, well, she owns like 15 million shares of Robinhood. I just interviewed the Robinhood CEO. I think if I emailed the PR people at ARK, I think they would be down to like, let me come do a podcast with her. I think that's what happened. I think she saw the Robinhood interview and she was like, well, I have $500 million of this company. I think when you tend to have a lot of money in a company, even if you're an institutional investor, you watch every little syllable the CEO says. So I'm pretty sure I had some Wall Street analysts that cover Robinhood reach out to me as well. They thought it was a really good interview. And I'm pretty sure she either watched it or her team watched it. And then maybe she found it on Twitter and then she followed. So let's see if we can get Kathy to be the next interview. I think it's very possible. I think it's realistically possible. And I thought it was realistically possible on Friday. Now that she follows me, maybe it's even more realistic. And if we can do that, that would be a really, really fun interview for the channel. So we'll see if we can keep that one going from there. All right, so let's talk about Bitcoin. How many minutes? We have 15 minutes until the market opens. Bitcoin has been doing pretty damn well over the weekend, but Bitcoin at this point, I don't trust it at 72,000. And the reason I don't trust it at 72,000 is because it's done this like for 3 weeks in a row at this point. It over the weekend, it'll go from like 64,000 to 72. It'll make this monster move, as you can see, literally 64,000 to 72, as you can see right here. Nice two big green candles on the weekend from 67 to 72. And then throughout the rest of the week, it'll dump, and it'll dump aggressively. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, well, why does this happen over the weekend? And the reason it tends to happen over the weekend is because a lot of the ETFs do their buying as well going into Monday morning because they got a ton of inflows on Friday. BlackRock got $400 million of inflows on Friday, and Fidelity got $168 million. So we're talking about $500 million of inflows to those two ETFs alone happened on Friday. So it seems like on Sunday, they called up Coinbase and they were like, hey, buy us $500 million of Bitcoin. And that, creates a massive green candle. And then over the week, everyone tends to sell at that $72,000 level, $73,000 level. We hit 65 about an hour ago. So it's going to be really interesting to see if this holds up. Obviously, this thing has a lot of the crypto stocks pumping in the pre-market. We have Robinhood at 1891. We have Coinbase. Oh, we got to talk about Coinbase as well. They won a case, which is kind of against the SEC, but it's also a class action lawsuit that sets the precedent for them to win against the SEC. We'll talk about that in a second. They're up 5%. CleanSpark, which got destroyed over the past week, that's up 7.63%. MicroStrategy up 11%. Marathon up 6%. Ride up 4%. Hut 8 Mining up 7.4%, 7.46%. We have, I think, 12 days until the halving event. And if that halving event is sell the news, which, I mean, it's possible it could be, then it's going to suck. If it's not sell the news, then it's going to get really exciting, right? If we actually see the supply shock that I think the market's looking for, then it's going to be really fun. But we got to see that actually happen in order for Bitcoin to do what a lot of people think it can do, which is potentially go to 80 or 90 grand after that halving event. Now, gold is also ticking incredibly higher. And it's weird how gold has been moving over the past week or the past 2 weeks. I think gold is up about 4 or 5%, which is a lot on gold. Remember, there's a $10 trillion market cap when it comes to gold. So Bitcoin moving by 4 or 5% is volatile, but it's, it's still $1 trillion market cap. It's, Meta moving up more than that, or Amazon moving up more than that is kind of akin to it. Gold is at 10 trillion. So as you can see right here, it's up almost 1% for the day. Gold does not tend to move at this level. To give you some context, gold was at $1,000 back in 2010, and it got to 2,000 by 2022-ish. So doubled almost in a decade, right? Bitcoin doubles kind of like every 2 years or something like that, right? Now it's almost 30% higher. It has been a few months, which is signaling that the market, you could argue the market is a bit scared of the ability for the dollar to maintain its hegemony and its momentum. The geopolitical crisis is leading the market to see less assets that are inflationary, gold and Bitcoin being one of those. As you can see, over the past 30 days, it's up 7%, past 6 months, basically up that 30%, 25%, 1 year up 16%, 5 years up 78%, and 20 years up 454%. And so it's going to be interesting to see how some of these assets are performing. If we do not stop spending money, which it doesn't look like we are going to stop spending money, Joe Biden is now getting ready to make his case to the Supreme Court again for eliminating about $400 billion in student loans. If that happens, then it's not going to be, the money printer is going to go burr. And if the money printer goes burr, then we're going to be spending a lot more money. And I think some of these other assets are just going to go higher because people are not going to be happy for the markets, basically for the governments basically inflating our currencies. There's just no way that stuff can keep holding up. Speaking of inflation, let's get an update right here in the context of how the market thinks about inflation and oil demand. Let's watch about 2 minutes of this, and then we'll keep moving forward from there. Oil prices are at their highest levels since November. Those need to come down. Here's an update on what's going to take for it to come down and how we can move forward to get oil lower so that inflation doesn't go to the moon.
Is coming off their recent highs as tension in the Middle East have eased slightly around Israel, withdrew more forces from southern Gaza, but geopolitical risks for the energy sector still remain, and oil prices are elevated over the last 3 months, up by about 22%. Joining us right now to talk about it is Dan Yergin. He is S&P Global Vice Chair and the author of The New Map, Energy, Climate, and the Clash of Nations. What happened? I know this is partially supply, partially demand, but we are looking at a big increase in oil prices to the point where people are sitting up and paying attention.
Yeah, it's a tighter market, and that's the fundamentals. On top of that is geopolitical risk. As you say, there's an easing today because of the Israeli troops, but what's hanging over it and what gave it that extra boost was after the Israeli attack on the consulate in Syria that killed the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Iran has said that they're going to revenge. Hezbollah says it's inevitable. And so the question is there going to be a more direct war between Israel and Iran?
With oil prices at these levels, we're already hearing from places like airlines where, you know, that's going to start eating into profits. What level do you kind of look at oil prices and say, okay, this is a game changer for the markets?
Well, I think it is in the low 90s. And if there is an expectation of higher prices, it's also a problem for inflation in general. And it's a real problem if you're an incumbent running for re-election.
Excellent points. Not much that can be done at this point, or is there?
Not much. I mean, they've used the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You know, apparently from what we read, the administration has asked the Ukrainians not to continue to attack Russian oil refineries. They don't want to see disruptions in the market, but there do seem to be limited tools, and there's only so much that a president can do.
So that gives you a hint of how bad this oil situation is getting. Again, I don't think it's going to be elongated in terms of the crisis that we're seeing with oil, but it is going to sting a little bit, definitely for CPI. If the Biden administration is asking Ukraine not to target Russian oil, which would be beneficial for Ukraine to be able to advance their military agenda, but it would destabilize the oil markets in an aggressive way. I mean, it just goes to show how complicated this geopolitical situation is. Literally, Ukraine is in war with another country. And the Biden administration is like, hey, we know you can target these guys, especially because you got Palantir, so you know what the hell you're doing. But don't do it because you're going to mess up our oil. And Ukraine, that just took $120 billion from Biden, is like, yep, we'll do whatever you say. So it's a very convoluted situation right now. And unfortunately, that is affecting oil prices in a pretty aggressive manner. Okay, Coinbase, let's move on to that story. So this story was very, very interesting as well. Coinbase has technically won their lawsuit. It was a class action lawsuit. It's not literally against the SEC, but it is the basis for them to take out the entire SEC's argument around using securities. So on top of the crypto exchanges, Coinbase has achieved a major victory in an ongoing legal battle. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit ruled in favor of Coinbase, confirming that the secondary sales of cryptocurrencies on its platform do not violate the Securities Exchange Act. The SEC was suing Coinbase because they believe that Coinbase is selling securities on its platform. And if you're selling securities on your platform, then you have to be registered with the SEC. You have to go through all the regulatory requirements that Robinhood has to go through. People are mad that Robinhood doesn't have Solana on its platform, or like some of these meme coins that are on Coinbase. Robinhood's business would cease to exist overnight if they allowed the unregistered sales of securities, because they are a brokerage and they have to deal with a lot of regulations when it comes to being a brokerage. Coinbase doesn't have to do that, or at least Coinbase has argued, hey, we don't really need to worry about that because we're a crypto company. And so as a result of that, the SEC at this point, given this class action lawsuit, seems to not have an argument anymore, because they can't say Ethereum, Solana, et cetera, are securities. If the courts have basically decided that that's actually not the case. So Coinbase disputed the applicability of security laws, arguing that secondary crypto asset sales do not meet the securities transaction requirements. There's no board of directors. There's no earnings calls. There's no cash flows. You know, there's none of the things you expect out of a typical security. Like, the reason even the shittiest companies on Wall Street have to do an earnings call, even though GameStop doesn't do one, which I think is very interesting. Like, the reason they have to get up and do an earnings call, even if they made like $3 million in revenue, right, is because, well, those are the regulations part of the SEC, and every company is held to that standard. So Coinbase is saying, hey, Ethereum doesn't have a board of directors. Like, Solana doesn't have, revenues that it needs to report. It's an asset that people can invest in, but it's not a security. And so from this perspective, it seems like it's a big, big win for Coinbase. The court's ruling mostly depended on how Coinbase's changing user agreements were to be interpreted, which posed difficulties because of differences between versions and made a definitive conclusion difficult to reach, which is all Coinbase had to prove. All they had to prove, which that, hey, we are definitely not a definitive security. So to argue that we are is stupid. And as a result of that, they ended up winning this class action lawsuit, which means they're probably going to be able to win against the broader SEC. And so there you go. That's very big news for Coinbase. Robinhood right now, $18.99, up 3.21% in the pre-market. CleanSpark up 8.4%. Bitcoin, 72,000. Coinbase up 5% on this news, and obviously on Bitcoin going higher. I think that's this news is relatively good for Coinbase, but at the end of the day, what's going to get Coinbase higher is for Bitcoin to finally break out of the $72,000 to $73,000 range that it's been topping out at. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be more momentum coming in. Hopefully that halving event creates the dynamics for Bitcoin to be, or for demand to be chasing limited amount of supply. And if that's the case, we should see some momentum in the context of Bitcoin. Robinhood now $19.05 in the pre-market. Max 7, Apple 168. They're down. We got to talk about Apple in a second. Microsoft is basically flat in the pre-markets. Meta up. Wow, 530 on Meta. Meta got upgraded to 525 by Jefferies last week. It seems like every bank is pretty bullish that Meta is going to crush these numbers, and they have a dividend now, the buybacks. I mean, the bull case for Meta is just becoming pretty strong. Google 154, Amazon 187, Nvidia 888. Nvidia up, trying to get back to that $900 level in the pre-markets, and then Tesla 169 up 2.6%. Let's see if Tesla can get back to 170 this week as well. How difficult is it to transfer Hood crypto to a hardware wallet? Has anyone attempted this? I haven't, so I actually don't know. I've never transferred Bitcoin to a hardware wallet. I don't think it's that difficult, but again, the majority of people I don't think are transferring to hardware wallets. But if you really wanted to, I don't think it's the hardest thing in the world to do that. Palantir in the pre-markets right now, 23.13. Okay, so on Friday, if you guys were here part of the market open, I said at around like 9:45-ish, I said, you know what, Palantir at 22.70. I think we're getting back to $23 today. I think it's going to happen. I just felt there was enough juice there from a technical perspective. We bounced off that 22.5 level many times, and I thought we're going to hit 23. We ended up hitting 23 by like an hour later. Unfortunately, we closed the day at like 22.89-ish, around that range, or 22.80. But we did get back to 23 for a while. Right now, we're at 23.10. I think the 23 level for Palantir is a little iffy, and the primary reason for that is because CPI is going to determine a lot from a macro perspective. Palantir is up 40% year to date, and now it is contingent upon the macro really doing what it needs to do. Why do I say it's contingent on the macro? Well, Oracle partnership, phenomenal. Market loved it. Stock sells off. Titan contract, phenomenal. Market loves it. Stock pumps to 27.55. Stock sells off. We've just announced good news over good news over good news, execution, deals, contracts, yada, 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 boot camps, all this stuff. Market really can't find its way to give it more than a 40% premium than it's already done to start the year. The U.S. Army and Defense Innovation Unit have also selected Palantir to participate as a software system integrator on the Ground Vehicle Autonomous Pathway project. I talk more about this in Daily Palantir that'll come out later today. But essentially, Palantir and Anduril were selected as software system integrators to build a new uncrewed autonomous vehicle. That's a picture of what it looks like right here on the battlefield for the United States. This deal reminds me of when Palantir got the Titan prototype contract back in 2022. And 2 years later, they get a $200 million contract, which probably is going to get to about $1 billion contract over the next few years as they build more prototypes. Each of those prototypes are worth about $100 million for Palantir. So this new thing, we talk more about it today on Daily Palantir, but this is another reason why Palantir is executing just phenomenally to start the year in regards to their government business that I believe is reaccelerating. We'll talk about Q1 expectations for Palantir after the bell, because I have some preliminary expectations on what I think Q1 could look like. But if we end up putting up good numbers in Q1, the market just has to decide, are we worth more than a 40% premium? And I guess the market will have to come to that conclusion in a few weeks when we have those earnings. And we'll see. Noodler says market can't buy Palantir, but it can buy DJT. Hilarious. Yeah, and that's a little bit of the state of the markets, in terms of the market kind of buying up some of these other assets that might not be the most profitable or have the most potential. But again, my argument on DJT has always been it's definitely a political statement that people are making, and it is what it is. This is America. People will vote with their dollars, prove things with their dollars, and if they want to do that, that's the case. It's just one of those things that's highly volatile, and you have to watch out for it if you're in those places. All right, here we go. Monday, April 8th, back on a Monday morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here with me and starting off your Monday. The stock market, once again, is open. Wake your ass up. Here we go. Let's get into it. Back for the markets. Bitcoin starting off the week. What are we at? 72,158. Not bad at all for Bitcoin right here. 72,000. Rocket Lab, $3.80. $3.80, up about 0.26%. IWM, Russell, up 0.77% at 206. Apple, wow, falling 1.64%. We'll talk more about Apple in a bit. But Apple is trying to do humanoid robotics potentially. Market's kind of scared that Apple doesn't really know what they're doing right now. 167 on Apple. Snowflake up about 0.2, up 1.2%. Coinbase 253 up 5.16%. Robinhood 1894 up about 2.91%. Palantir to be hold 23. Let's go, baby. 2309 on Palantir. Let's see if we can hold those levels as we get into the market. DJT, Trump up about 0.3%. Destiny Tech 100. We talked about this ETF last week. It's up 15%. I think it's exploding. Garcia actually messaged me about this today because their assets under management are exploding. This is a ETF that has exposure to like SpaceX and OpenAI and other startups. I would be weary of this. This thing has pumped like 115% or something over the past couple of days. Their AUM is exploding, which is what I think it's leading to the stock price to go higher. So you just have to be a little worried if you're getting into that one. MicroStrategy 1590 right now up 10.5%. Amazon 186. Wow. Amazon is $1 away from all-time highs. Amazon is $1 away from all-time highs. Put it in the chat if you're long Amazon. I think this is the most obvious one to probably be long. I don't have a position in Amazon, but let me know if you are long Amazon. That V-shaped recovery from 188 to 88 back to 188 over the past 3 years has been a pretty damn good opportunity, probably the opportunity of a lifetime. So let me know if you are long Amazon. SoFi 761. Look at that. SoFi up 3%. Not bad at all for SoFi, showing some strength and momentum. S&P 519, that's up from 513 last week when Neil Kashkari. By the way, when Neil Kashkari talked and tanked the market, S&P fell to 513. That was a dip opportunity. Now, maybe CPI tanks the market as well. But look, it was a dip. I mean, like Kashkari talking on CNBC and the market having their algorithms interpret whatever he says and then just selling things off. That is an example of the market being irrational. And S&P has recovered, not fully recovered, but that was a dip that you could have bought in certain stocks given they were down that day. Spotify 310, Oracle 124, that's down a little bit for the day. Google 154, Ulta down 15% last week. Nasty drop. You see that right there, 530 to 438, back up to 453. This one was obviously going to rebound. The question was going to be how much. So it's up about 4%, recovered a little bit from that 15% drop, but that one is up on the day. What else do we have? Let's see. Uber's down 2.26%. Uber is probably down because Tesla announced those Robotaxi plans and the market is scared. And I still have no idea. Let me know in the chat what you think. I have no idea how the Robotaxi affects Uber. Like, does Uber make its own version of Robotaxi? Do they license FSD because anyone can license FSD? That's what Elon said. So do they make their own fleet of Robotaxis? Does Tesla make the Robotaxi fleet proprietary to them so no one can access the Robotaxi version of FSD? Does Tesla buy Uber to just take their distribution? Does Uber die out if like you don't need a driver anymore? Because then Uber's business model is done. If you don't need a driver anymore and Robotaxis are cheaper, so I think the market's kind of interpreting what's going on there and they're trying to figure out what's happening. I just noticed, by the way, I was not changing any of the tickers on the screen. I'm so sorry. All you guys were looking at was Palantir as I was reading other tickers. The reason for that is because my Mac is being kind of weird. And so I have a second screen where I'm controlling the tickers, but I was not showing you the tickers as I was reading them. So I'm sorry about that. But NVIDIA right now, 883. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Uber over the long term as they have to deal with this FSD news. Let's see who's long Amazon in the chat. We got Raphael saying Amazon will go to 300. I know Vitali's here in the chat. Vitali's been screaming about Amazon for a couple of years now. So Vitali has Amazon going up. Ian, Amazon is long, up 42% this year. Where's Tesla? We didn't look at Tesla. As the market open. Tesla, wow, up 3%. Tesla's giving a big FU to the market. Market wanted Tesla to tank. They got another downgrade by Bernstein today at 120. Tesla saying, nope. Look at that. Tesla's being a champ at 170. Tesla's being an absolute champ at 170 right here. Brian is long Amazon at 132. I bought 50 shares of Amazon at like 95 and I sold them a while ago. I don't know why I sold them. I sold them to buy something. I don't know what I bought. Honestly, I probably sold them to buy the TFC spreads that I got a while ago. Those spreads ended up doing really well, right? But I don't have any more Amazon, but if you got it at that below $100 range, very, very good. Very, very good buy when it comes to Amazon. SoFi 757, Robinhood 1873. What do we have? ARM at 124. Truist 3843. Truist, a regional bank that's absolutely been crushing it. BlackRock IBIT is up 6%. ARKB is up 6%. All the Bitcoin ETFs doing well today as Bitcoin goes higher. Beto, I do have leaps on Beto. It's a Bitcoin futures ETF. This one is up 7% as well. And Palantir struggling to hold that $23 range right now at $22.99. We'll see if it can hold that level. Benny says, I've got Amazon at a 115 average, DCing out to put into Tesla as it dips. You know, again, the Tesla story is just so interesting. Again, for those that are just joining, on Friday, Reuters put out an article that Tesla was going to scrap the M2 $25,000 car. Elon said they're lying. Stock rebounded 7% from the lows. Then Elon, an hour later, said, hey, the Robotaxi is coming on August 8th. What does that mean? We don't fully know, but it does mean that FSD is becoming good enough for Robotaxi to really have an impact. And as a result, you've got the market that's thinking, well, wait a second, you know, maybe Kathy's not crazy. Maybe Kathy and her price targets on FSD are based on this Robotaxi thesis, which I have, you know, publicly said I don't think that's happening for a while. Maybe that is happening. And if that is happening sooner than we think, you know, maybe we're just all high off Elon's tweet right now. But if it is happening sooner than we think, then this whole FSD fantasy is not really a fantasy. It's going to become real. And it's going to become very exciting as it scales. Again, Tesla right here hitting 1 billion FSD miles driven. It's just no other company is able to have this type of data. No other company is probably going to be able to scale as fast as Tesla is doing when it comes to that. And so when you've got that much momentum coming from Tesla, really hitting the ground running, I mean, that 1 billion, I think it can turn to 2 billion over the next couple months because now FSD is enabled on everyone's devices or everyone's cars, at least for a month. There's going to be a lot of momentum coming in for FSD. That's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. Benny says it'll be 2 billion by the summer. Yeah, I think it's either the summer or before that. It can get pretty exciting. Robin at 1881, SoFi 760, Pound share 2291, struggling to maintain that $23 level. It keeps getting rejected at 23, but right now at 2289, we'll see if it can hold those levels as well. Going into the rest of the week for Palantir. DJT, wow, that's down 6%. Trump's down 6%. That one's getting hit. That market cap right now is still $4 billion. Like, look, this thing could fall another 10%. The market cap would still be $3.7 billion, which means Trump would have access to $1.6 billion of capital if he were to sell today. I mean, like, it's still I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Susquehanna Group comes in and buys up some of these shares and keeps this thing afloat. We know that Jeffrey Yass, the owner of SIG, wants Trump to win so that TikTok doesn't get banned. Trump today did come out and say that he believes abortion should be a state's issue, not a federal issue. Obviously, he's taking a more neutral position on abortion. The sort of typical Republican evangelical position is to, ban abortion completely for religious reasons. Trump knows that part of the reason the Democrats lost in the midterms is because they had such a hard stance against abortion, and he's playing a bit of politics here. So we'll see how his positions evolve over the coming weeks, but TikTok he's evolved on pretty dramatically, and maybe it's because of campaign donations by Jeffrey Yass. Enphase at 115, SolarEdge at 68, C3 AI, $25 of Verizon down a little bit today, $42, and Microsoft here at $423 on the day. Tesla again holding up like a champ, 170 right now, doing amazing. Where's Reddit? I haven't looked at Reddit. Where's Reddit? Reddit holding up as well, 47.74. I think 47. What, market cap 8 billion? It's not crazy, dude. Market cap 8 billion for Reddit's not crazy. Now, when it got to 65, that was a bit ridiculous. But 47, $8 billion market cap. They do about $1 billion in revenue. They're going to be profitable probably next quarter. They were already profitable for the back half of 2023. I don't think it's an insane valuation. I just want to see what the growth is in the context of their AI data moat that they're trying to convince the market they have the best real-time data on the planet, which I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but Reddit, says that's the case. We'll see how that evolves over the coming months. But if that is exciting for Reddit, then 8 billion is not that crazy, in my opinion, of a market cap for Reddit right now. Let's talk about Elon as well. He's also in the news because he's having some fights with Brazil. He's having some fights with Brazil. Why is NVIDIA dropping so quick? Where's NVIDIA right now? NVIDIA's at 870. Oh, yeah. NVIDIA taking a little bit of a tumble, down 1%. Entire market taking a little bit of a tumble right now. That's what tends to happen when the market opens up hot. People take their profits as it's just the thing that happens. So let's see. I mean, the fact that NVIDIA is even holding 850 to 900, I think is just exceptional, right? But that one is probably getting some profits being taken into. Okay, Brazil and Tesla. We got to talk about that. So over the weekend, Brazil basically instructed Elon Musk to cancel a bunch of accounts on Twitter. He basically said, hey, these guys are saying bad things about Brazil. We need to get rid of this stuff. Elon said, no way, Jose, we're not doing it. So a standoff between Elon Musk and Brazil escalated on Sunday when a Supreme Court judge opened an inquiry into the billionaire after Musk said he would reactivate accounts on a social media platform, the X that the judge had ordered blocked. Elon's basically saying we might have to potentially forego existing in Brazil if this continues to happen, which he's ready to leave Brazil entirely in the name of free speech. Neither Musk, X, nor Brazilian authorities have disclosed which social media accounts were ordered to be blocked. X first posted about the order to block on Saturday, but it was not immediately clear. Moraes is investigating digital militias that have been accused of spreading fake news and hate messages during the government of former far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, and also leading an investigation into an alleged coup attempt by Bolsonaro. Very interesting political stuff going on right now. The take I saw this morning that I thought was really interesting about this whole Elon issue with X and Brazil is, imagine if the CCP told Elon, hey, you have to ban certain accounts on Twitter. Now, Twitter's not in China, but if you've ever been on Twitter for a little bit, there's a lot of Chinese accounts. Just like if you type in Taiwan, you're going to find a trove of accounts. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of accounts that are basically saying, Taiwan's not a country. And they're saying all this kind of propaganda that the CCP want them to say. I've been targeted by these accounts before. Like I'll tweet something about China and I'll get all these responses saying, actually, China's amazing. You don't know the blah, blah, blah. And you go to their profile, they have like 5 followers, and you can obviously tell this is a bot created in some farm in China, right? A streaming farm that is trying to propagandize this stuff. It would be very interesting to me if China instructed Elon, or the CCP instructed Elon, to get rid of certain accounts because they didn't agree with them, or they were going to, take actions. I don't know what those actions would look like. I don't think Elon, and I don't even blame him for this, would have the same response he's having against Brazil, because 25% of China's revenue, or Tesla's revenue, is in China. And so, look, I know a lot of people say he's a hypocrite on that perspective. I don't think it's hypocritical. I mean, sure, it is hypocritical, but at the end of the day, like, business is business, and Tesla's in the dumps, and you cannot have Tesla lose business in China. And so I think if Elon were instructed, he might follow through just to make sure that Tesla is safe, because you'd never want the Chinese government incentivizing their citizens to not buy Teslas through whatever way they might do it. But I think the CCP also has a really bad economy right now, and they don't want to mess with their economy. Tesla is a big part of their economy, or at least one of the parts that matters in their economy, in the EV sector. And so they probably don't want to mess with it. And then, they're not going to do any funny business. But I wouldn't put it past them to potentially do that over the coming months. Coinbase 258, Google 155, Meta 525, Apple 168. So the news on Apple is that they're trying to get into humanoid robotics. The idea is that Apple is going to be creating robots. This broke on Friday, that could basically be smart robots which work in your home, help you get things done, kind of what Optimus theoretically is. The weird rumor about these robots, look at this. The company's preparing robots in the context of iPad. So it was really interesting how the idea for the iPad on the robot was going to be a robotic arm with an iPad on it. I can't find it here in the article, but the idea was that the new robot will become a robotic arm that would move with your face as you move, and iPad, it would be an iPad screen, and as you move with your face, the thing would move as well. And the initial reaction to that article was like, please, for God's sakes, Apple, do not make a robot that's an arm on a desk with a manual iPad that moves with you as you move. Like, that would be the most, like, it would just be the dumbest thing they could possibly make. If they don't go that route, and they actually go the route of building real humanoid robotics, it would be pretty cool. It would be pretty cool to see them get into that game. I think a lot of companies are going to get into the game. The problem, the reason the stock's down right now at 168 is because the market's like, dude, Apple, are you just throwing shit at the wall at this point? Are you throwing, you threw away the EV thing, the generative AI, Gemini, you're just throwing a ton of stuff right now at the wall, trying to see what sticks. Did you just put out this robotics news because you think the market will like it because robots are becoming hot? And I think the market's really scared. They have no idea what's happening. The S&P 500 is up year to date 10%, or about 9.5%. S&P right now 518, even though Tesla and Apple are down respectively 10 and 30% each. So to me, that signals a really good thing about the state of the markets if Tesla and Apple don't have to be up in order for the market to be up. But it also signals what the hell is going on with Apple. What plans do they actually have going on? Because if they don't have any real plans in place, they're not going to continue to get rewarded by the market. I mean, they're going to keep getting hit pretty aggressively if they can't figure out how to show what their next level of growth is. But if it is a robot, then maybe the market's going to get excited. We'll just see when that plays out. Ian says, amid Apple or missing Johnny Ive massively, Cook is only a manufacturer CEO and he has no vision. I agree. I think it's a lack of vision, but I also think, and this is the thing that, I give Apple a lot of credit for that people don't tend to agree with. I think it's very hard for them to innovate because their products have gotten so good. It's really hard to figure out the next evolution of what those products are. Again, I think the Vision Pro doesn't really matter. No one wants to use it. The iPhone is good enough. The iPad is good enough. The Mac is good enough. So you have to figure out a way to diversify the business outside of hardware, which is services, but services can only grow so much. So I think Apple's in a real pickle of trying to figure out how to justify the 27 PE, 26 PE with 2% year-over-year growth. The only way you do that, in my opinion, is you do even more buybacks, which is not really the best use of their capital at this point. Or you increase the dividend and you make it a real dividend play, like 3-4%, versus how much is Apple's dividend right now? Apple's dividend is 0.57%. You give 3% on owning those shares. I think people will keep holding them. You don't, people are not. And it's going to be hard to see how it's happening. Mike's Huss says, I don't think he's a hypocrite. Okay, it's hypocritical. Again, the thing about Tesla and Elon in China, I think he's hypocritical when it comes to the CCP. However, from a business perspective, I don't care. Like, as a, when you think about Tesla and from a Tesla shareholder's perspective, it's, you got to do what you got to do for Tesla. And at the end of the day, I think Tesla being Tesla and the ramifications that can have on the entire automotive market and overall climate change is probably more important than free speech in the short term. So if Elon has to sacrifice one or the other, this becomes a game of utilitarian calculus. I think Elon becomes hypocritical and he picks Tesla over free speech. Now, for Brazil, where Tesla is barely doing any business in the context of Brazil versus China, he's not going to be hypocritical. He's going to stand on his feet, which he should. And that's a good move by him. But where it actually affects his dollars, everybody becomes hypocritical. And I think it is what it is. As Marx says, capitalism outweighs morality. In some situations, that is very correct. It does outweigh morality. So that's what we got in the world of Tesla. TSM, let's talk about these guys. So Biden gave them $6 billion to start manufacturing a plant in the United States. They are pledging to build a third Arizona plant. Biden administration said on Monday it expects to spend about $6.6 billion in federal grants to the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They promised to build a $25 billion Arizona expansion that will bring a TSMC fabrication plant to that state. TSM on this news, it was up about 3% in the pre-market. Right now, up about 2% as we open the markets. The deal, the second major U.S. chip-making grant announcement of the last 3 weeks, is part of President Joe Biden's effort to restart advanced semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. Why does this matter? Taiwan just had an earthquake. If that earthquake actually, really messed up the TSMC factories, the entire market will be in shambles right now. So we really do need to diversify. And I think that earthquake was another warning to the Biden administration that they should do something before things get really bad. Intel right now is basically flat on the day. Intel is mad they didn't get this $6 billion. Now, Intel did get about $20 billion of subsidies, so they can't be that mad, but they wanted more money. Biden said, let's give it to Taiwan Semi. They know how to actually do it. We think they can, we want to give it to multiple vendors, just not one vendor. And so Taiwan going up on those news versus Intel, which has just been in the gutters right now. Steve says, hey, Amit, Citi just upgraded SoFi to 11. Wow, not bad. So we got another price target on SoFi. We were just at $10 by Kyle Peterson last week. Wow, SoFi up 2.3% on that. Let's see if we can find that upgrade here. SoFi, yeah, here we go. So this is the analyst. Seems like it's a decent analyst, not a bad analyst. So SoFi analyst Ashwin Shrivakar initiates $11 price target on SoFi. He is a success rate of 56%. Citibank. The convertible note deal was a win. These transactions include the exchange of $600 million in convertible senior notes due in 2020 for approximately 73 million shares, an action that is expected to improve SoFi's total risk-based capital ratio and be accretive to the company's GAAP net income for the first quarter of 2024. They will be more profitable than what the market expected because of that convertible note deal. So that is something that's important. And he says $11 should come on SoFi. Very interesting. And it just goes to show you again, every time we get some random analyst say $8, $10, $11, whether it's on Palantir, SoFi, Robinhood, Tesla, whatever it may be, PayPal, all of these guys are not that much smarter than you and me, right? Like yeah, they have a thesis, they have an argument. And they make the argument. I've seen, thousands of people on Twitter say the convertible note deal was actually really good, right? But they don't have the prestige of working at Citibank or whatever, so their opinion doesn't get broadcasted across all the the Bloomberg terminals and all that stuff, and gets people to feel the impact of their opinion. But it's an opinion at the end of the day. So until you really build your name for yourself as an analyst, someone like a Dan Ives, right? It's hard to just assume that these people, whatever price target they're throwing out, matters. But their arguments aren't that different from what a lot of us are saying here in the social media world. It's just a question of when those opinions become mainstream. And in between those, there's opportunities to buy the dip, which I was able to do a decent amount on SoFi at $6.80. Right now, I'm holding 215 spreads. I wanted to get to 250 spreads before earnings. My average cost is 23 cents. The cost of the spread right now is 24 cents. So I'm up about 5% on that position. Let's see if I can add about 45 more options before going into earnings. I think we get a pump up to like $9.70, $10 if earnings goes well. If not, we're probably stuck in purgatory until the next rate cut. But if earnings goes well, then SoFi should have a decent quarter. It shouldn't be too bad. Reddit 47.73, Tesla 172. Wow, Tesla's up 5%. Look at Tesla, dude. Look at freaking Tesla. It's just incredible, dude. It's incredible. Elon Musk is just defying odds with what he's doing right now. I wrote a post about this on Friday, that if Tesla makes their comeback, which, I mean, it's too early to say, but like the stock price is looking like they want to make their comeback. We'll see what happens over CPI reports that come out. But he would have survived the worst deliveries from Tesla in 2022, since 2022, a fake Reuters article, Fed presidents warning the market won't have rate cuts, and Tesla's uniquely affected by this, and then a potential robotaxi unveil. Somehow the stock went from being down 10% last week on Friday to now only being down about 2% from the low, from where it started at 178 back on Monday last week. Right now at 172.47. It's just really hard to bet against Elon Musk. As Golden Eagle says in the chat, I wouldn't bet against Elon. It's very difficult to bet. And the thing about Meet Kevin is he bet against Elon. And I think right now he's going through a little bit of a crisis internally for betting against Elon, because I don't know if you guys saw, but he was live streaming when the Reuters article came out. And look, I love Kevin. He's a good guy in my opinion, but that Reuters article came out and he was happy like a kid on Christmas morning, for the first time they're experiencing Christmas. I mean, he was not trying to show his happiness because obviously the stock was down, but the dude liquidated his whole portfolio. So he was pretty damn happy that because now the stock might get to levels where he can rebuy at 145-ish, which is his price target on Tesla. And then Elon's like, Robotaxi, motherfucker. That thing just goes higher. Here's Meet Kevin arguing with some Tesla bulls on Friday. And one of the Tesla bulls actually calling him out on his opinion.
Revenue forecasts from this unveil, because we're going to get something over, hey, this is the vehicle, here's the testing, here's where we're going to do it, here's how we're going to do it. And the revenue might be a few years down the road. So that leaves us stuck with Q1, Q2, which right now aren't looking too great. And then
I know you want to buy and you need 10 days, but stop talking down the stock. That's all you're trying to do. It's all good.
No, it's not.
No, that's not true at all. Well, hold on. Again, it's completely disrespectful to my argument. Well, hold on. I gave you all a chance to talk. I made a very respectful argument. I said I agreed with you with the licensing. I said there's a political risk you didn't mention regarding attracting talent to Tesla. And I also made a respectful argument and said, I actually made a prediction. And I said, I think we're going to start with a small scale robotaxi launch where they compete with the Zooks and the likes of Waymo, and that they can expand 100 times faster than the others. These are actually extremely bullish statements. I just think they're realistic statements. They don't help us Q1, Q2. Duh. So then I was going to say, what does this do for 26, 27, 28? But then you did cut me off. I think for 26, 27, 28, that's probably when Tesla really starts pricing in the explosive growth, because that's when Wall Street's going to be able to start realizing, aha, Tesla's doing what the Waymo's doing, but look at how they can scale 100 times faster. Tesla AI just posted, Tesla hit 1 billion miles of FSD. So this is great. Like, Tesla has so many wonderful things going for it, but I just want to be clear. It is rude for me to be here and then you make that accusation. And this is the second time now I'm asking you to please be respectful. I'm being very respectful.
What side are you guys on? Tesla or Boomer Mama? Tesla or Boomer Mama? Put in the chat. Or sorry, me, Kevin or Boomer Mama? Kevin or the mama? Which one do you think she was being disrespectful there? Do you think she was kind of like accusing him? I mean, she said, I think, the dirty part that everyone thinks, but she said it. Was it a little rude and aggressive? Yes, it definitely was. I'm not going to lie. But she kind of said what everyone, and by the way, I didn't expect her to say that. I mean, someone's gracious enough to come on your show, right? Like, I didn't expect you to just call him out live like that. But she said what everyone's thinking, which is that he wants the stock to go down so that he could buy back in cheaper. It's not rocket science. If you sell a stock at a higher price, you want it to go down lower to be able to buy back in, right? But in his defense, he's saying, actually, I'm being realistic. You guys are ultra bullish. You guys are in a cult. You guys don't understand what the fuck's actually happening with Tesla. I'm smarter than you guys. I manage more money than you guys. I can analyze this shit better than you guys. Therefore, don't be disrespectful if I'm giving the realistic thoughts on what's happening in the market. Unfortunately for Kevin, the price is not correlating with his understanding or his analysis of where Tesla should go. And we'll see if that happens after CPI. But right now, Tesla's up 5% on the day right now. So whose side are you on? Are you on Kevin's or Boomer Mama's? Which one would you say? Katie says Boomer Mama is too sensitive about Tesla, but Kevin does have points. I would agree with that. I think that's fair. If you're in the markets, you should flip-flop, right? You do options, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, like 100%, you're allowed to flip-flop in the market. I think everyone should flip-flop and based on the data. It's just, you got to understand, Kevin built his entire career off Tesla. And so at the time where Tesla's becoming kind of the most exciting with FSD to get the most bearish, it's a very interesting conundrum to be in as an analyst. And like, you know, it is what it is. And so you're going to get some pushback if you're bullish for years and now you're bearish when Tesla seems to be getting to the point where maybe it becomes what everyone think it can become. And also, by the way, just one quick thing. When a stock goes down aggressively and people have followed an analyst for years on that one stock, that's when they look to that analyst for comfort. And this is not me saying this. Dan Ives has said this multiple times, that his job as an analyst is to really walk his institutional investors through the hard times. If he's bullish on Tesla, he has a $310 price target, and Tesla's down 30% year to date. He has to walk his institutional investors, if he's still bullish long-term, through those hard times. That's kind of your goals. Honestly, you're a little bit of a therapist. That's what it is when you're a fund manager, when you're talking to clients all day. That's what, Tom Lee described it as well. So if people have followed you for years on Tesla, and the time where they need you the most to give them the optimism, you give them the pessimism. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying people are not going to like you. It's just like, it's the nature of how this stuff goes. So it's a little tough to justify that. Vitaly says his thesis will play out. If his thesis does play out, we're looking at Tesla at 145 from a technicals, from a fundamentals, what he thinks it should be worth. Like if his thesis plays out, Tesla goes to 145. And look, there is legitimacy in his thesis. It's not just his thesis alone. There's a lot of arguments for why Tesla should be in the gutter. I just think the fact that the stock has held up so well means that it's going to be hard for that much bad news to continue to be baked in and get this puppy down to 145. I mean, at this point, the market's basically decided, hey, we're willing to buy it at these levels. It's down 30% year to date. I don't know how much more bad news you need for this thing to come down, but the market's not necessarily letting it get to those levels. Chris says, who else called for Tesla to drop below 150? This guy. Well, let's see. Meet Kevin and Chris are basically in the same bucket right now to get Tesla down to that 150 level. And we'll see if it actually goes. We'll see if it actually goes. If I have to go on the record right now, I would say, dude, if I had to pick, I don't think Tesla gets to 150 or to 145, which is meet Kevin's level. Maybe it gets to 150. I'll save myself. It maybe gets to 150. I don't think it gets to 145. If it gets to 150, look, here's the thing. I think if Tesla were to get to 155, 152, I think people load the fucking boat, dude. I think people do not let a generational company get that low. There's too many people that get excited. By the way, those people, not just retail investors, I think Wall Street says Wells Fargo with their 120 price target, I think starts to buy, So maybe we don't get to 145. Maybe we get into those mid 150s, but I don't think, even if we have a bad Q1, which we're going to have a bad Q1, the street knows, like the street right now, the thing's up 5%. Wall Street knows Q1's going to suck. They know that because we got the delivery numbers. The delivery numbers means the revenue growth, everything's going to suck. Why is this thing up 5%? Why is it up 5%? It doesn't make sense. Wall Street probably knows Reuters was somewhat correct about the M2 being scrapped and Elon going all in on Robotaxis. Why is the thing up 5%? If the M2 being scrapped was such bad news for Tesla and, the $25,000 vehicle not being in production tanked at 10% on Friday. Why is it up 5%? I mean, who's buying this thing? Is retail moving it up $40 billion as we open the markets? I don't know. I think a lot of the bad news is baked in regards to Tesla. Chris says Q2 numbers are going to be terrible. Only thing that would change that, in my opinion, is high gas prices. Here's the thing. I think even with Q1 and Q2 being terrible, people are still going to buy exceptional companies, which Tesla is, if it gets to these levels. And that's how kind of I feel this thing's going to play out. If Tesla gets, if the numbers suck, I still think 150, 162-ish, those dips get eaten up because people just feel that FSD's potential justifies paying a little bit of a premium, even if the margins and the volumes and the delivery side is not that good. That's what I think happens. We'll see if it actually plays out. But as of now, based on what I'm looking at, I think the bad news is baked in. I don't think this is a go all in by the dip because CPI data could tank this bad boy another 5-6%. But seems like bad news is definitely getting baked in when it comes into Tesla. Okay. Now, granted, Elon could say some stuff and other bad news could happen, right? So you never know with Tesla, but we'll see. We'll see. That Q1 earnings, I think it's going to happen April 23rd or something, or April 20th. Those earnings are going to be very important for Tesla. Here's something I posted over the weekend that I thought was really interesting. So Ken Griffin, who runs Citadel, the hedge fund, this is his updated holdings for those that have not seen his updated holdings before. And this is what we've got going on right here. So top 5 holdings: NVIDIA, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Micron Technologies. One could argue this is a QQQ NASDAQ level holdings, big tech, heavily concentrated. The one thing that I got to give Ken Griffin and Citadel credit for is that 5th one, MU. Micron put up $793 million in surprise net income profits last earnings. And that shot the stock up 30% based on that. Now it's up 30% ever since those earnings. The fact that Citadel had 6% of their fund in Micron, I mean, that was a gem in a hard to find market because everything was going up. Where do you find the thing that's not going up yet? Micron, there you go. That has led to a really good performance by Citadel year to date. JPM is in there, AT&T is in there, S&P is in there, AMD is in there, Eli Lilly is in there. They returned 15% in 2023. A lot of people were like, oh, they're only returning 15%, but NASDAQ returned 54%. S&P did better than Citadel. You got to remember that Citadel is a hedge fund, so they're constantly hedging, right? The average hedge fund did 4%. They're taking a lot more risk. They're being a lot more speculative. They're doing a lot of different things. So yeah, could you have bought the NASDAQ? Sure. And gone up 50%? Yes. But hedge funds operate differently. Also, the NASDAQ doesn't always go up 54%, right? Like, so typically for a hedge fund to do 15-20% a year is way better than the rest of the market. They just happen to do it in a year that, the NASDAQ was doing very well. But still, it's interesting to look at what that is. And in context of Nancy has NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and CrowdStrike. And then Palo Alto Networks as her top 6, which is updated. Palo Alto Network wasn't there in that 9% range. Look at Palo Alto. It's gone up from, I think it was like the 7th position now to the 6th position. So she heavily loaded up after that earnings fall from Palo Alto from the cybersecurity perspective. And that's what we got for Ken Griffin and Nancy Pelosi and their updated holdings. Palantir 2297, Destiny Tech 100. It's up another 27%. Again, this thing, it seems like more assets under management are getting pummeled in to this ETF, which is why it's going up. I would be really just weary if you're trying to get into this thing. They own SpaceX, they own OpenAI, but I think the pump has happened pretty aggressively. Could it pump more? Sure. But you got to be really worried when something goes up like almost 200% in 3 days, right? So that one is up right now, 23%. A lot of meme traders are piling into this one now because this one is pumped and that's when people start to chase. So I would just be a little cautious of that one if you're getting into it. Robinhood 1864 up 1.25%. Google 156. Google being an absolute champ. Right now. Just the recovery of 2023 if it holds this level, not bad at all for Google at 156 after bottoming it at 131. 10-year right now 4.42. So that one is ticking up a little higher. If CPI comes in at 3.5, 10-year is going to probably get to 4.5, 4.6, I would argue. And if 10 years back at those levels, we're looking at levels back of November for the 10-year. Remember, the 10-year was at 3.85 in January. Now 10 years at 4.4. So the bond market is signaling that they're a little worried about inflation, which is, reasonable. What that could be, Bitcoin right now 71,836. What that could be leading up to as well is if the bond market is so scared about inflation and inflation crushes, like we have a really cold report versus a hot report, that could lead to a monster rally on CPI day. I mean, that could be like a J Powell type of press conference rally. Will that happen? I don't know, because CPI is probably not going to be the best. But if CPI ends up being colder than expected and the market's expecting a bad one, maybe that is a good Wednesday that we get when it comes to inflation. I would be very wary of doing an earnings play, or not an earnings play, a CPI play, because if CPI goes to the downside, the market's going to sell off. Like we've been through this many times. The funny thing is though, in January, February, when CPI was bad, the market swallowed the 1 or 2% decline within a couple hours, and then it boosted back up. And the first time in January, within like 20 minutes, and the market was back to normal. So it'll be interesting to see how resilient the market is towards the CPI as well. Is PayPal up? PayPal up 1%, 65.76. They need a good earnings to get back into that $70 level for PayPal. SoFi 759. They're up 2.58%. Not bad at all. Bitcoin 71.7, trying to maintain the 71 level. Hopefully, I mean, on Sunday it stayed at 72, and then on Monday last week it collapsed like 64, or by Tuesday. So we're gonna need a couple days to see if this one holds up. But right now it's definitely struggling a little bit. Here's an analyst from Charles Schwab. Here's his opinion on where investors are in terms of their confidence and if they're going to be coming back to the markets or continuing to pile into these markets over the coming months.
Talk markets as we get ready for the opening bell on Wall Street. About a half an hour, 35 minutes from now. Joe Mazzola is Director of Trading and Education for Charles Schwab. I want to talk to him about the retail customer, or the retail investor these days. And what are you seeing, Joe, in terms of what's happening out there, in terms of what folks are buying or selling?
Yeah, so we released our stacks report, the Schwab Trading Activity Index, on a monthly basis. We saw a pretty hefty bump, about 8%, up to 51.65 from 47.65 in February, meaning this: investor confidence is really starting to pick up. We definitely saw that in March. That's our 5th straight month of increases. And it takes us back to levels that we haven't seen since May of 22. So, a nice bump in the month. We saw, buying kind of mostly centered in IT. And you would definitely see that in NVIDIA, Apple, and then Tesla coming in terms of discretionaries. But those were really the 3 buys that we saw across those sectors.
We've been trying to make sense this morning, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on it. Bitcoin up at $72,000, and sometimes people say, well, it's a hedge on what the Fed's going to do. Now it looks like the Fed's actually not going to be lowering interest rates. Then others say it's actually a great sort of indicator of speculation and liquidity in the marketplace.
Yeah, so let me give you some stats that we saw from March, specifically around maybe whether it's Bitcoin or some ancillary plays. If you look at our biggest sale, which I find interesting, was Coinbase. So even though you saw Bitcoin rally as much as it did, and Coinbase rallied at 50% basically year to date, we did see investors trend into some of that strength. We also saw some of the ancillary plays around Block, and then fintech as well. So PayPal was one of the bigger sells as well. In terms of whether or not that shows investor enthusiasm, or I think FOMO is some of the term that gets thrown around from time to time. I think what it shows is that investors are looking for other avenues to find some upside bias. Right. It's something that when I see that, it does tend to send up a little bit of a red flag. I think that one of the things that's interesting is, even though we saw that 8% increase, we're still kind of below those meme stock levels of 75 or so in the stack. So yes, we did see a big bump, but we're not seeing the leverage plays, at least at Charles Schwab, that we've seen in the past.
Joe, I don't know if you.
It's a fair point. I mean, at Charles Schwab, they have $8.8 trillion assets under custody. They're seeing a lot of momentum in the context of different assets that are going higher. And from their perspective, if Coinbase and Bitcoin are going higher versus traditional equities, it's because people are looking for a little bit of diversification, because big tech has done very well, and that diversification might be coming from different asset classes like cryptocurrencies. LIFW is up 38% today. This is a company we talked about on the channel that is working with Palantir. Palantir owns about 900,000 shares. They got 250,000 shares last week, disclosed in an SEC filing. I talked about it on dailypalantir.com. The stock was at like $1.10 when we talked about it. Right now, it's at $1.84. People have asked me, hey, Amit, did you buy this thing? The answer is no. The answer will always be no. There are simply some principles I have, and one of those principles is not buying random shit just because, you know, it's associated with a company I like Palantir. Like, I just can't do that, dude. I did that in 2020 and 2019. I went through that phase. Maybe I'll miss out on gains. That's fine. I'm just, you know, I just can't do that. Like, philosophically, it's not in me anymore. But if you did pick up these shares and you went against what I was doing, you're probably up 45%. The scary thing about these companies is this thing would not be up right now if Palantir did not disclose their stake of 900,000 shares. So you could make a bull case that, oh, if Palantir is working with these guys, then, you know, their software is going to be so good that it'll send the stock higher because the company will do better. I think that's a bullshit argument. I think just because Palantir is working with this company does not mean the company's just going to go to the moon. It's especially a company that's worth $200 million, it was worth 80 million like a couple of days ago, right? So those are things I'm very weary of. It's not one of those things I tend to get into, but it is exciting to see that a company that is just associated with Palantir gets some momentum from the market. If you're up on this thing, I'm not saying sell. I'm just saying, dude, we've seen these things crash and burn many, many, many times. I don't think it's the craziest thing to take some profits. Surf Air Mobility. This is a company that also works with Palantir. Let's see their chart. Yeah, so these guys pumped to $1.43 back in back in January. This is when I did a video on them as well because they were working with Palantir. Yeah, they're now at 85 cents. So, and again, Palantir basically bartered equity for software. So they gave them the software and the company gave them equity. This thing is down basically 40% since then. So you just have to be a little cautious if you get into these plays and know that you might end up losing some money here. That's okay. But you got to know that going in and not just assume it's going to go up because Palantir is associated with it. It's always an iffy play with small caps. That is correct. Always an iffy play with these small caps. Okay, let's talk about earnings going into next week. Or going into this week. We actually do have some earnings besides big banks. Here's 5 companies I'm looking at to go through. Just going to read through them very quickly. Tilray, BlackRock, JPM, Delta, and Constellation Brands. Those are the 5 companies that are on my watch list this week. Tilray, simple thesis, cannabis company. Cannabis has been under scrutiny for the past 4 years, ever since a lot of these companies started to go public back in 2020. There have been new regulatory changes over the past few months, Germany being one of the companies or countries that's thinking of completely decriminalizing it. So you're getting some momentum in the cannabis sector. Tilray is one of the leading brands. It'll be interesting to see what they look like. Their stock is down 96% year to date, but they're up, all time, but they're up 13% year to date. So they're getting some momentum even though they've been down. Then you've got BlackRock. I think what's going to be interesting about BlackRock is they just launched that ETF, 10 billion under management. It's the fastest growing ETF of all time. So I wonder how much that implicates their earnings. They have over 10 trillion in assets. Going to be interesting to see how Larry Fink thinks philosophically what's going to happen with Bitcoin in the coming days or coming years, given that ETF is now official and it's just growing like gangbusters. JP Morgan's been on a tear. I mean, having this in your portfolio, I don't have it in my portfolio, but it's one of those things that's like, JP Morgan is one of the largest banks in the world, and it's done that through brute force, but also just phenomenal execution and really good leadership by Jamie Dimon. He sold shares for the first time in the past 20 years. So if you've had this in your portfolio for a long time, it's done very well for you. It's up 17% year to date. The thing I'm looking to understand from JP Morgan is how much they think they can continue to consolidate power in the banking sector after the Silicon Valley Bank crisis. We saw a lot of banks kind of have to get eaten up by JP Morgan. I want to see what further continues there. And I want to see what they think about rate cuts because they're holding a ton of losses on their loan portfolio. So if they think rate cuts are coming anytime soon, that would be good news for JP Morgan. I think Jamie Dimon selling is not bearish. He's just been holding shares for 20 years. So you would expect someone to take profits when the stock's at all-time highs. But overall, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the context of JPM. And then you got Delta. I want to see, they're up 15% year to date. I want to see how many people are taking vacations, how much air travel is going up. Constellation Brands, a lot of people might not know about this one, but they've done a ton of acquisitions in the beer and wine space, and they buy social media first companies when it comes to beer and wine. So I'm actually very interested because it's harder and harder to get attention. Mr. Beast with chocolate obviously is becoming a really big way for going up against the Hershey's of the world. I'm curious, is Constellation Brands going to make more acquisitions in the beer and wine space? We've seen Kylie Jenner and Kendall Jenner with their 808 tequila brand. Is that a new play? And is that something where there's an asymmetric opportunity there? Because it's really hard to get attention if you've got this big company going after acquisitions for brands that are attention-based first. We saw this with Elf against Ulta and their social media go-to-market approach. I wonder what that looks like in the context of alcohol. And so it'll be interesting to see where that plays out as well over the coming years. Someone says, I work for JP Morgan. Dude, the stock went from 45 to 200. That's awesome. Yeah, if you've got those options, given you work there, I'm assuming you've done very, very well. And JP Morgan deserves to do well. I mean, they've just executed phenomenally as a bank. And if you work there, then your options should be doing pretty damn well at JPM. Are you buying anything today, Amit? Probably not. Probably not. Again, this is CPI week. It's a little. First of all, there's no crazy dips that I'm looking at. I did buy Palantir and Robinhood last week. I bought them on Friday. Robinhood right now 1847, Palantir 2295. So I think I got some decent dips on those. We'll see what happens. But with CPI, you just never know. If anything, I think CPI is going to be hot. And there's a buying opportunity on Thursday versus today. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out over the week. Palantir 2295, Coinbase 252, Google 156, Robinhood 1848, PayPal 6590, SoFi 753, S&P 518 on the day. Nvidia here at 877, 875, and then Tesla just holding up like a champ, 171 right now, up 3.82%. All right, let's do word of the day, and then I will get you guys out of here. Thank you, everyone, for being with me on the market open. I did that study about plethora versus plethora. Everyone on Twitter on Friday, I posted the video. Everyone told me I was wrong, and they said that the chat was correct, that it was plethora. I still think everyone's wrong, and I'm going to stand up for my dreams and fight for my beliefs, my rights, and I will continue to say plethora. So it is what it is. Everyone can be wrong. I'll go up against the world. I like being the underdog. And if I got to be the underdog, then I'll be the underdog. That's it. I'm not getting this one wrong, okay? The word of the day is totality.
Totality.
Dude, if she said totally or some shit like that, I would have punched the freaking screen, dude. Okay, this is a boring word. We already know this word. Let's do a better one. Word of the day. Let's go to Merriam-Webster. This is boring. We know totality. Okay, this is an interesting one. Fatuous.
Fatuous.
Okay, of course I got that one fucking wrong. Fatuous. Dude, tell me that didn't look like fatuous. Literally, what did he say?
Fatuous.
Fatuous. I've heard that word before, but it looked like fatuous. You can't tell me I'm wrong on that. I'll acknowledge I'm wrong on that, but it looked like fatuous. Look at that. Look, fatuous. Oh, no, that doesn't sound like fatuous. I didn't do the CH. I said fatuous versus fatuous. Okay, so if I followed the instructions, I would have said it right, but still, it looked like fatuous. It definitely looked like fatuous. To describe something such as an idea or remark as fatuous is to say that it's foolish or silly rather than sensible or logical. Okay, so let's see if the downgrades on Tesla by the street are going to be fatuous over the coming months or if they're going to be legit. And we'll see what Tesla looks like coming up on Q1 earnings to prove if these analysts have it right or wrong. All right, that's it from me. Thank you, everybody. I'll be back at 3:45 p.m. We'll see how this market goes. Hope you guys have a great Monday. Let's crush it. And I'll see you guys in a few hours. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.